Good afternoon, everyone, or whatever time it is, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us today. We're super grateful that you've taken some time to spend with us to learn about this managed cybersecurity compliance program that we're officially launching today called 360 CyberCompli. Typically, when we host these webinars, we are providing insights on trends in the industry or talking about a specific framework. Today, we're actually launching, like I said, this program. We've been working with new clients for the last 9 months or so, but felt like it was time to really bring this out to you folks to share how this could help your organization, and then help you out and answer some questions afterwards. So Eric, if you want to go to the agenda. So today, what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce to you our panelists today and let them introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the meat of things. We're going to really look at what we call the journey, or how did we get here, in terms of like, why did we feel like this was a program that would fit really well in the marketplace, and how we think we can help. And then we'll talk a little bit about why outsource your compliance function, and then really get into some of the details of how the program is built, and then activities that would support that program. And then we'll look briefly at some of the frameworks that we end up supporting along the way. And then I'd really encourage everyone to ask questions if you have them in the chat, and we'll answer those, and do those throughout, and as they come up, we'll answer them in real time. And then at the end of this, you'll get an email from us asking us how we did. Please let us know, and let us know if you'd like to have more conversations on the topic. So go ahead and head on to the next one. So 360 Advanced, we'll get into this along the way as we're having this conversation. But 360 Advanced is an audit and a cybersecurity audit and compliance firm. We've been in business for over 15 years, and we're still privately held. We're about 80 employees, and so we have a very entrepreneurial spirit about ourselves, and so we're able to have real nuanced and detailed conversations with our clients, and we're not very prescriptive. And when I say that, we're here to help you solve problems, and we talk about helping make better businesses. That's one of our slogans, and we feel like this 360 CyberCompli managed compliance program is a way to do that. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And so let me introduce to you the two gentlemen that are with us. I'll let them introduce themselves, and and they can share how they got to 360 Advanced, and then we'll get going. So Brad, you've been here the longest. Why don't you share with the folks your experience and how you got to 360 Advanced?
Sure. Thank you everyone for joining today. So I've been in IT security field for about 20 years. I started out my career with a mid-sized firm out of Minneapolis. I was a CPA firm, and I started out in their consulting division. And as we grew, we were doing a lot of disaster recovery planning, a lot of strategic planning for government agencies. As we grew, we got into SAS 70s and ultimately HIPAA reports and doing a little bit more on the audit side. And then in 2011, I met up with Dan Collins, our president CEO, and took a position with him down here in St. Petersburg, Florida. So I've been with 360 now for a little over 12 years now. And we started out really just SOC 2, PCI, HIPAA, and as the standards and cyber compliance programs grew, we grew with them. We've tried to maintain a spirit of really, it's all just risk, right? And trying to figure out the best way through compliance is understanding our clients, their business, their risk profile, and then applying real judgment to scenarios to try and figure out what really makes sense. So in that vein, we try to maintain a real quality service, right? We try to keep our costs down. We're not obviously one of the larger organizations out there with a lot of overhead costs that we don't have. So we try to maintain real fair margins on our work, provide high quality service, and have a high client retention through client satisfaction. So that's a little bit about 360 Advanced and myself. We'll get into a little bit more about some of the other things that we do here. and why we felt CyberCompli is a good addition to our service set here, and how we're doing that. So.
Excellent. And David, you're certainly newer to the organization. Kind of share your background and what brought you here to be a part of the team.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Carlos and Brad. Yeah, to expand upon what Brad was saying, I started with 360 back in, I don't know, maybe about 6 months ago, and it was primarily to come in and help grow this managed compliance practice. I had spent, prior to 360, 12 years at PricewaterhouseCoopers, or PwC, as many of you might know. I was in their assurance and IT audit practice for about 4 years, and then transitioned into cybersecurity and privacy, and then eventually moved into cybersecurity and privacy consulting aligned to their risk and regulatory practice there. So I came over when I bring a lot of experience in the area. I'm working very closely with Brad to help build out this program, make sure we deliver a quality product to our clients. So, as we progress, we're really looking to make sure we align ourselves with the right types of companies, make sure we're a good fit for them, make sure we can help them grow from within and help better their business, like Brad mentioned earlier.
Excellent. No, that's great. And so let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And so thanks for joining us today. We do like to tell you a little bit about the future webinars, so you can put those on your calendar. We're going to do one on pen testing in April, and in May we'll talk about ISO 27001, and then in June we'll talk about the helping folks through their high trust journey. And then all these webinars, including this one, can be found on our website at 360advance.com under resources. Okay, so go ahead and go to the next slide, Eric. So how did we get here, right? And so let's talk a little bit about that and why we feel like this service line can be really helpful to businesses out there of all sizes and truly of all types and all disciplines. Typically, like Brad said, we've been the audit firms, so we've been on that side of the table. And then so now we're stepping over to the other side of the table to be an outsourced function. So Brad, through your experience at 360 Advanced, I mean, what are some of the things that you've seen with clients that have come to us that made you believe that this service could be valuable?
Right, and Carlos, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. I'll touch on it again. I think there's different types of service auditors that are out there. Some of them look at some of these different standards, and the process that they go through is very much what we call check the box. I mean, it's not very handhold, and it's not helping the clients really understand what is their right risk profile and why does this compliance standard make sense, or how do you really understand what the requirement means as it pertains to your environment. And so that's one of the things that I think our firm does a really good job at. However, what we've noticed over the last years is as the standards seem to grow, and they never shrink, they evolve, our clients evolve, the demand for assurance using third parties or B2B companies only grows. And what we've identified is that some of even our best clients, they don't have the man hours, they don't have the people, they don't have the knowledge and or the executive presence, maybe in some scenarios, to really make sure that they're embodying the compliance standards that they have and really integrating these things into their business and making sure that it really all works together holistically. So this is where back in 2018, we changed our motto to making better businesses. And the idea was at that time to think about what else can we do for our clients to provide that. And this is much more of a holistic approach where we are trying to help them not only get through compliance, but also live it and really make sure that it's efficient and not debilitating or hurting the business, if you will, but really trying to figure out what makes sense to the business. And in this service, we can really do that and then help hopefully reduce the audit risk of whatever standards they're trying to go through. So we'll touch on this a little bit more down in a later slide, but one of the biggest benefits I see in a service like this is that if you have an auditor teeing you up for your audits, meaning they're making sure all your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted before you go into an audit, the level of risk of going through that audit, the level of time that you'll need to spend, the level of time the auditor will need to spend should go way down. And so this is very much, in trying to be that partner that is living with you year round and through the audits and facilitating all these different things. So Carlos, I think I said enough there. I don't want to
No, it
spill into
makes
the next slides.
no, it makes complete sense. And this is, we're certainly having a conversation about this today. And again, folks ask questions along the way. But one of the things that I've noticed, since being at the 360 Advanced and in this space is that a lot of times, especially folks that have not gone through a compliance initiative, like say for instance a SOC 2, that's a lot of times one of the first ones. They'll come to us, and a lot of times there will be a sense of urgency, but a lot of the groundwork hasn't been laid. And so maybe, David, talk a little bit about, why it's important to align your business to a framework early on so that, compliance doesn't have to necessarily be a fire drill.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of that is just forward looking and being strategic about what you're doing, how you're spending your time and using your resources. So making sure that you've built up a program that is sustainable and is a good foundation to grow with is vitally important in the early phases of building any sort of program, right? We want to make sure that we're looking at what are, our obligations right now and what could they be, 3 to 5 years from now, making sure that we have a program that we can build on top of, right? And not treat each one individually or keep it in a silo and have to approach each one at a time. So when you speak about compliance, compliance is somewhat of a wrapper around your cybersecurity program. And when we're talking about cyber compliance, so you want to make sure that you're encompassing a full program that you can build off of and that compliance can align to. So, in most aspects, we usually look at, the first, 6 months what do our clients need right off the bat? And what are they going to need a year from now? What are they going to need 3 to 5 years from now? And make sure that what we suggest to and what we begin to put our efforts into is something that is going to be, give them a competitive advantage later, help them meet whatever requirements they need to today, something quickly, but also can expand upon, as we reach those 3 to 5 year initiatives. And of course, having a foundational cyber program that aligns to, these various frameworks and compliance requirements and laws is a really big part of that.
Excellent. No, it makes a lot of sense, and those are certainly some of the conversations that we're having with folks, and it tends to really resonate. Do you want to go to the next slide? And then so again, we're talking about the compliance initiative can be very painful if you're not prepared and you haven't laid this foundation that we're talking about helping organizations with. Maybe one thing we can talk about. What about organizations that are already, doing, say for instance, SOC 2 or any type of compliance initiative? They already have a program, and maybe it lives within, their, underneath their security function. How could they use this service in terms of an overlay or being, more of like an augmented, service? Like what would you see that looking like, Brad?
So that's a good question, Carlos. And we do have a couple clients already that have come to us this way, where they've been living a SOC 2 program for the last few years, but they really at the executive level feel like they're getting through just because they've got a checkbox auditor, and they don't really feel like they understand the requirements or their risk profile, and they just don't have that expertise, right? And so what we've come up with here is a way that they can fractionally employ a team, and you're getting an entire director all the way down here, leveraged model where we can apply and do many different things for the organization to help that executive team sleep better at night, make sure they're really living through a good sound program and have the risks well thought out, and getting through their audits much easier, even if they were to go to, say, a quality firm that's really going to test things the correct way and go through the process how it's intended to be. So
that makes a lot of sense, and I think that a lot of times when the security function at an organization is running compliance, there could be a certain amount of audit fatigue, right? Because they're already doing basically their full-time job in terms of being in the security practice, but then they're tasked with also helping their company through these compliance initiatives. And so for at a fraction of a cost of a full-time employee, we could come in and help, augment that so that they can reduce audit fatigue, and then also just have a more of an executive level presence regarding compliance, since, compliance and security aren't necessarily the same thing.
yeah, that's a good point, Carlos. there's a lot of different things too. We'll get into some of those different things that we can provide services for, and I think
Yep.
you'll start to see, hopefully, as we move through the slide deck a little bit about, how we can help organizations. But one of the interesting things in the months that we've been doing this so far, and the handful of clients we've onboarded already, they all need something a little bit different, right? And that's where I think 360 Advanced does a very good job of, whether it's our audits or now in the CyberCompli side, of really customizing our approach and our ability to be nimble with the client. Our idea here is to become part of your team. Unlike the auditor, where you have to have that separation, we don't have to have that. We want to be considered the first person you call when one of your clients comes to you with a security questionnaire and you don't know how to answer it, right? We want to be on that level with your organization, and really help you through thinking not only about how do we get through this year, but as Dave mentioned earlier, how do we set a strategic roadmap that yields a great return on investment? There's a lot of different standards out there, and I'd say this is true about most of them. 70 to 80% of the things that are covered are generally the same types of things. It might be way more granular in, say, PCI or high trust or NIST, as opposed to a SOC 2 or a HIPAA. However, they're still touching on the same, subject matter areas. So it really is there's a lot of strategy in thinking about how do we go ahead and build you out a program that maybe includes not only SOC 2, but also HIPAA or also ISO down the road, and how you can do that without increasing your costs or your audit fatigue, or the amount of time your subject matter experts in your team that don't know compliance. How do we not burden them too much, but really grow your organization and get you into new industries and selling to new clients?
Perfect. You want to go ahead and go to the next slide? I think it's a slide that, what is it? I think, yeah. So a holistic, customizable, managed compliance service. And so that's what we're talking about today. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Eric. And why outsource compliance? And actually, we just got a question in, Brad and David, and the question is, can you, in the essence of the question is, can you help an organization by with this service and also be their auditor? Is that possible, and what would that look like?
Yeah, I'll take that, Carlos, and Dave, add on to anything I miss on this, because this is something that comes up quite a bit. The answer shortly is yes, we can definitely do that. We have gone through every single standard and really pulled out all the technical aspects of how to maintain independence and what we can and can't do. We've set up a framework, if you will, on our side to know exactly what is the boundary. And roughly speaking, the way we look at it is we cannot operate controls for an organization. We cannot design their system without their say, right? So in a certain sense, it's almost like we are performing a readiness assessment, telling where the gaps are, being a little bit more hand-holding on making sure that remediation happens, that you're pulling evidence correctly, that we're spot checking your programs. But I'll give a couple examples, and Dave, I don't know if you can think of any others, but vendor management is one that we've gotten a question on, and due diligence around vendors, onboarding them, annual checks to make sure that the risk profile hasn't changed and that management's really got the proper oversight on the vendors that they're using. So the way we can do this and maintain independence such that our audit team can come behind our work and the work that we work with our clients on to do an independent audit is we can review how the process works currently. We can make suggestions as to what should be done, who should own it, what level of scrutiny, and we can be available for any questions they may have as they're reviewing a vendor to figure out, hey, how should we classify this vendor and their risk profile? That's something we can help them figure out, but we can't do it for them. We can't just say all new vendors come to us and Dave and I will tell you exactly how they should shake out and whether they should have to have some kind of SOC 2 or if a security questionnaire is enough. That's not something that we can do. Another one is, what was another good one I was thinking of earlier? Onboarding employee. I mean, you could go down the list of almost any topic, and it really comes down to, more generically speaking, we can't be the ones that are relied upon to operate a control, but we can definitely review all of your controls and make sure that what you're doing is very efficient, effective, and that there's real accountability within your organization and Also, make sure that you're going through the process in real time and that you're collecting the evidence that will become necessary for your audit. And if we do all of this, we stay on the right side of the line in order to hand off to another team on the 360 Advanced side. And it would have to be separate individuals all the way up to the director to do the audit itself. And I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but we might as well get into it now. One of the biggest advantages I see in this holistic approach of CyberCompli and 360 Advanced compliance is really, this is the same methodology or way of thinking about risk and controls and everything else. It's the same team members. So when we look at something and help you build it and know, we have a certain level of certainty, if you will, of knowing that our audit team falling behind is really going to feel comfortable that this is the right level and that the right evidence is being produced and the procedures seem designed effectively. So the costs come down, the handoff and the friction, if you will, through an audit, the amount of back and forth should all come way down. And that's one of the nice things about this is if we stay on that right side of the line, we have that opportunity. Carlos, not to go too much farther.
No, I think that's great. And I think that does explain, how you stay on that right side of the line. But David, I'm going to turn, the script and say, what if there's a client that, needs a little bit more help, in terms of, and to where we maybe couldn't be the auditor. I mean, what would that look like in that particular case if it was the best thing, to help the company we're trying to help?
Yeah, I think we try to identify that up front, but it's not always feasible to identify all the potential activities that are going to come up. So what we try to do up front is really understand what each of our clients needs and how we can deliver that. If there's the opportunity for us to be able to help through the audit, great. We want to make sure that we try to stay independent, just as Brad described. But in certain circumstances, some of our clients just need more help than we can deliver while trying to stay independent. So we have to look at other ways of performing things that allow us to go a little bit deeper into things and allow us to, get on more of the design side of things, or in certain circumstances may not operate in controls in a compliance role, right? That's not generally the role of compliance. So we're generally not doing this usually in IT or security operations function, but we can really help make sure that we're designing controls effectively. We can make sure they have the right processes in place, and we can put pen to paper in many instances as well, whether it be helping draft policies and procedures, or just going through other types of exercises that the organization may need to do, testing certain types of, recovery plans, just give a few examples. So there's a lot of things we can do. It's just establishing that up front is a good thing to do. But again, if we identify things later, right, it's not too late to say, hey, we were trying to stay independent, but now we have to do this, that, and the other thing. And, we'll help find an auditor, right? But we can't be your auditor in those cases.
No, that makes complete sense. Okay, so let's go on, and then we can see why outsourced compliance. I mean, these are pretty straightforward answers. I mean, in general, the biggest reason that we would come in and help is because if you're going to outsource a component like this, it's mostly going to be because it's more costly and more beneficial to do this than hiring 2 or 3 people, right? And so that's a big part of the benefit along with the other ones we see here. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And we did get a question about security questionnaires. That's going to come up here in a little bit when we start looking at some of these activities that kind of go along with the program. And so we have a diagram here or an image, and I want to just walk through this with the guys here real quickly and talk about what these mean in terms of how the program would work on a pretty high level. But so we think about understand, analyze, execute, and report. So in terms of understanding, like what does that mean, and how or how do we get started with a client in that way?
Dave, I'll start with this and then jump in.
Yeah.
So when I think of when does that process start, it's right from the first phone call that we have, right? It's even before they're a client, we try to understand what is it that the business is up against, right? And how do we help you best? And really what we're doing through our sales process is really identifying, what are the big pain points over the next 12 months? Where's the business going? What are some of the things that we might be able to help do for your organization? And then we work back and forth to tune that up over a series of short calls And then we work towards a statement of work once we've agreed to general terms. And there's nothing in our contracts or process that requires us to not have that be set in stone, right? We can always change. We can go up and we can come down. So we try to find what is the base, what makes the most sense that out of the gate should work. And then through that process, once we are contracted, we take our level of understanding of the business to the next level. And we do that through a couple different calls that are usually what we call a gain and understanding call. We're really getting into the technology that's used. We've already had some high level conversations around the infrastructure and the systems and the data. Now we're taking it down to another level, right? And we're trying to really figure out how do things work within the organization? Where are some of the key pain points that the management team or the IT security team may have already identified? And then from there, we're generally, if SOC 2 was something that was on the radar for this year, and I'll just use that as an example, we're probably going to need to do some level of readiness assessment, help identify what are the controls, help write out the system description, help figure out what needs to be remediated, how best to do that. And then we will even go as far as gaining access to your ticketing system if you have one, and really monitoring and managing to make sure that those things get remediated on time such that you can be living the program and bypass the need for even a type 1 report, go straight into a type 2 report with high confidence that you're going to have very good results. So that's a little bit about the analyze phase, is that really we're trying to figure out where you're at exactly against a certain standard, what do you need to get to, and really help you out through that. Then execute, we're overseeing the remediation, but we're also going to go as far as helping to facilitate the audit itself, making sure that the service auditor, whether it's us or another firm, likes the document request list, likes the understanding of the controls, how they work, the system description. All of that should reduce the amount of auditor risk if they think about the project to a level where your fees should be compensated lower to some extent because you have somebody like us on the front end helping you build that program out, and just creates, like I said, a much reduced risk profile for an auditor to get through it efficiently, effectively, and have a high quality report that they can lean on. And then the reporting, which happens year round. I mean, this is we believe in trust, but you earn trust through transparency. And so what we do is, through the initiatives that we set out and contract under, we will set outputs for each one of those things, and then we're going to track against them in real time against a real-time dashboard that can be reviewed at any one point. We'll do monthly status reporting, and then we'll even go as far as offering once a quarter, jumping on a call with your executive team to put together and present a small slide deck on some of the initiatives that have been completed, what's coming up, and talking about the roadmap for the future.
No, that's perfect. That's a really good explanation of how the whole system would work. And this is really how you'd want to run a compliance function in general. It's just we're able to step in and help you to do it holistically, as opposed to it being maybe a little bit more fractured if you're just working towards executing the the compliance activity or initiative. David, I just got a question here in, and I'd like your feedback and see if you can answer this for the folks. Someone asked about policies and procedures. I mean, we tend to get a lot of those questions because, a lot of times folks, either don't have those in place or they're super generic and they're not, mapped correctly. I mean, how are we able to help with, policies and procedures and at what level?
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. I think there's just maybe two main scenarios here that we typically run into. One of which is, an organization will have some policies and potentially procedures already drafted and, to some extent, aligned to the organization, but maybe there's other things in the pipeline that are coming up and the policies and procedures don't align to it. What we can typically do here is do a full review of their policies, procedures. We can look through all the compliance requirements that are either current or, future, and build those into the current policies and procedures by doing again, this goes back to our other conversation, right? If we're trying to maintain independence, it's one way. If we're not, it's another way, right? That we can assess them and recommend certain things. If not, right, if we're not trying to maintain our independence, we've done this many times. We have templates, we have all the requirements of all of these different compliance and regulatory laws, whatever it may be, and we can bake those in and update policies and procedures as needed. Of course, procedures come with the assistance of management and whoever owns those processes. But we can help write those. We can draft those, depending on our independence initiatives. We can take those all the way through the finish line if need be. If not, we provide marked up policies and procedures about what we see and what we recommend and things to consider. So there's two different ways of approaching that. And then smaller organizations, a lot of time, early often don't have policies or procedures at all. And that's something that we can absolutely help with. It's something well in our wheelhouse that we've done many times. And we have templates and we have policies that we can put together that just are foundational, that give you a starting point that really outlines all the policies needed for a comprehensive, program, and comprehensive around all the policies that you need to align to based on whatever we identify as being the requirements or compliance initiatives. So certainly something that we can do.
Excellent. No, that's great. And we get those questions a lot, so I'm glad someone asked that. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Eric. So let's, so within the, the 4 steps that Brad talked about and the holistic program, I mean, there's obviously things that need to happen, right? And so some of these things need to happen. We're going to list here and walk you through some of these. But the idea is that with this custom program, we're able to do certain things, always, and then select other things that are very specific that help folks, accomplish their goals. I mean, one of the items that is at the top that we're doing, from the beginning and always is that, compliance program definition. And I'll just kind of read these through, guys. And then if you pick one of these that you'd like to really, talk about, do that. The audit facilitation, how we're actually helping with the audit, the readiness assessments and risk assessments, that Brad alluded to. Penetration testing. We have a penetration testing team. We can build that into the program if that's, or scanning, the privacy program assessment and the security architecture reviews. I mean, those are all activities that can happen within this program. Is there one that sticks out to one of you that you feel would be important to get a little bit deeper into?
Yeah, I'll take that. Audit facilitation. I get this question a lot, is what does that mean, right? How does it help your organization when you're already contracted with a third-party auditor, whether it's 360 Advanced or another firm? What we're trying to do is review and be the initial person that they reach out to collect the evidence. We're doing a skim of the evidence as it's being uploaded and prior to getting to the auditor to make sure that it meets the bar, that it's high quality. We are fighting battles, if they push back or they want to test something in a way that we don't feel is necessary or would create a lot of risk, we're going to be there to push back on them and say, this doesn't make sense, and here's a better way to look at it, and here's why, right? So we're helping to reduce your risk in the audit, your time commitment in the audit. We can't go collect the evidence for you per se, but that's not something that we potentially could do some of, right? And we can be the point of contact such that you do not need to have anyone other than an executive sponsor to oversee the program and really receive status reports from us. So once we've identified the control owners and who's going to be involved from your team, we can act as that project manager or the lead, if you will, and making sure that your team gets through it. Carlos, I don't know if that.
No, that's perfect. I think that's great. One of the other ones that I see here that we've been talking to some folks about, and I think mostly because a lot of software companies or SaaS companies are, have to deal with compliance because they're being, required to by their clients and stakeholders, or these, security, architecture reviews. David, you've been on, some of being a part of some of these conversations. Like, how is that helpful to an organization, especially one in the early days, or even if they're established? Like, how does that part of the service help?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are a lot of implications and when doing system design and migration, certain types of implementations. There's a lot of things to consider in that process. And if you don't have someone on your staff or someone advising you as to how to build your systems with built-in compliance and security, you're leaving yourself at risk of having to redesign a system later on, which I think we all know takes time, takes money, takes effort, causes extra stress if someone has to rip things apart there, we put back together. So what we like to do up front is make sure we're involved in those conversations, understanding what potential changes are coming in down the road, whether it be one of the most common things, migrating to the cloud, right? If you need to do that, there's many different roads you can go down, many forks in those roads as well to decide upon, and making sure that you're choosing the right ones is going to set yourself up for success later, potentially save you money in the long run, right? Make sure you're not overbuying anything that you don't need, but also making sure that you're going to be compliant with whatever's on your roadmap. If you're, or we'd like to understand who your clients are, what those implications are from a compliance perspective, and make sure that whatever you're designing now is going to suit your needs later, right? And you're not having to go back to the drawing board and start over. So those are usually very easy, quick conversations too. It's just having someone just, at the table that understands that up front and can just give that, quick guidance and quick recommendations there. It's not usually a big overhauling process, but, it's something we usually like to be involved in and make sure we understand where you're going and how you plan on getting there, and that we have our input into those processes and those designs.
Perfect. No, that's something that we've been having a lot of conversations with folks about. So I think it's a nice aspect of the program to bring up. Do you want to go to the next slide, Eric? I know we have a couple more, of the activities that would go along with this. So security questionnaire assistance. Brad, that was a question that was brought up from the audience, and it's something that we tend to be talking to people a lot about, because these darn security questionnaires, I've never heard anyone say that they were happy to get them. So maybe talk a little bit and how we can help and what that process would look like.
Sure. Yeah. That's one that's been a problem for organizations for a long time, and I don't see it ever going away, unfortunately. Every large entity out there, a lot of times they'll have security questionnaires no matter how much compliance you've completed, and you're just going to have to fill them out no matter what. It's just part of business. And one of the ways that we feel we can help in that is using a leverage model. We will collect any security questionnaires you've completed over the last 12 months, or whatever the period of time is that makes sense. And we'll add all that information into a large matrix, if you will, and we will have, using different team members, as you get new security questionnaires in, we'll work to fill those out and take a first pass at them, and then review them at a manager and director level, highlighting ones that we're not sure on, and we can develop a rapport and process, and obviously it will take one or two to get through to really get that rhythm down and make sure that we're answering these things correctly. But I think one of the biggest advantages is that we understand who's on the other side of the table reading these questionnaires, and we want to make sure that we're providing a very strong answer that's still fair, right? That doesn't get you into trouble by overextending your answer a little bit. So we can answer these things in a strong way without getting yourselves into trouble. We will ultimately need you to still review them to some level, but it should become fairly efficient. So the way we've done this is we've said, hey, how many did you get over the last 12 months? And a lot of the clients, it's somewhere between 1 to 12, right? And if it's something you'd like us to look at doing, we agree to how many generally will happen over a 3-month period. And then we work that into our plans. And if it ends up being more or less than that, again, back to my comment earlier, we can tune our program up or down to make sure the cost makes sense for both sides. We're not going to be worried about any 3-month period in itself, right? The idea is that generally over a period of time, we're going to get to working together, and we want to have a long-term working relationship. So we're just not worried about short-term things, but we are going to be tracking all this stuff to make sure that we can continue to provide this service and that we're not overextended as to our commitments based on our contract and the fees were collected. So that, Carlos, I don't know if
no, that helps. And I think, you explained it well, and I think to encapsulate that, it's we can help take that burden off of you by taking on those security questionnaires. And if you have 6 a year or 20 a year, we can or more, we can help you with that. David, I'm going to spin the wheel here, and I'll let you kind of land on one of these that sort of catches your eye, that you feel like is a important component of the program that you'd like to maybe discuss in a little bit more detail.
It's a good question. I guess I'll start at the top, and I'll just talk about GRC platform management, or GRCs as a whole, and I guess we can get into the management aspect of it after. But I think a lot of our customers, and a lot of potential customers that we speak to go down this road where they go, well, do I go the technology route as in a GRC, or do I go the people route as in hiring someone to do this, right? Because sometimes cost is a factor and you can't have both, or sometimes one's more necessary than the other. So really understanding, which road to go down is a big part that we can help with initially as well. So, if someone's out there trying to figure out, do I buy a GRC platform and sign up for X amount of dollars per year? And we all know the cost can vary greatly based on, how much your need is, the number of instances, how many users, how many compliance requirements, so on and so forth. So really understanding if it's a true need, it is something we can absolutely have a conversation about. And then, it really comes down to, making sure you have someone to manage it as well. If you go the technology road, it's, someone still needs to manage that platform. Someone needs to understand it. Someone needs to live and breathe within this thing to make sure that it's staying up to date and accurate, or else it just ends up sitting there on the shelf collecting dust and no one's using it. And we've seen it plenty of times where that happens. And I'm not talking down any GRC platforms. There, all else being equal, it's going to be better to have technology supporting you, absolutely. But is it completely necessary up front? Is it necessary to take on that extra cost? Not always, especially if you're early on and you're still building a program and you're not sure what your compliance requirements are. I'm not always certain a GRC platform is the answer, but if it is, certainly something we can help administer. We can take that off your plate. We can make sure that we are administering that tool, keeping it up to date, understanding what changes come through in there, making sure that the controls are aligned to what the new, whatever the new requirements are, and just maintaining that with management. There's all different capabilities within GRC tools that can be leveraged, and they all vary based on which direction you go. But pretty much all aspects within that GRC platform we can manage. We can manage for you and take that off your plate.
No, that's helpful. No, that's great. And so we got a couple more questions, which is really great to see. So I'll kind of throw those out here. One I can answer, and then one, just someone asked about, charge per questionnaire. I'd say that with all these services, this is why this is built into a managed service, is that, during early days in conversations, we're going to understand what the level of effort is going to be to help you accomplish your goals, and then we'll build that into a monthly fee. And so it's not, per anything. It's more of like, let's look at this holistically and see what it's going to take for us to help you accomplish your goals. And if it's 20 questionnaires, we'll build that in. If it's 6 questionnaires, we'll build that in. And if it goes up or down a little bit, we can find time to do those, and we can be flexible. So that's the answer to that. But one of the questions that we got here, and Brad, maybe you can elaborate on this. Someone is interested in, a little bit more about what the, security, or what the, the security architecture reviews entail, and how that might be helpful. Maybe pull the, curtain back on that just a little bit,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
Yeah, so we have a couple people in our firm that are extremely technical. They have, engineering, architect backgrounds, and they've come to really understand beyond that all of the compliance standards that we operate in. And so what we've come up with to help out some of our clients, and this is usually much more important for smaller clients, but it's also true for large clients in certain scenarios, is that, if they're looking at migrating to a different cloud or to the cloud, and this is just one example, they don't know enough potentially about, which services within AWS or Azure they should be using to make sure that their compliance is on par with where it needs to be, and that they're getting the best return on investment for going to the cloud. So this is something that we can help with, absolutely. And our guys are through just a series of phone calls can understand what you're up against, look into it with you, and provide feedback and direction on how that would be. They're not going to actually get into, migrating the systems themselves per se, but they will help facilitate the process, meaning that they can guide your team or your contractors or whoever's ultimately doing it to make sure that you're going to have the right spend, get the right tools out of it, and make sure the architecture doesn't mess up your compliance program in any way, or enhances it, hopefully.
Makes complete sense. And so then I'm going to then dial into this one bullet here, 4 down, this ad hoc conversations. I mean, I think that, although there are, specific activities that are built into this program, it's really important to understand that us as a resource is the biggest or the largest value, right? And how we can help you from having conversations that come up, and how we can help you with even relating to or having conversations with your vendors, like for instance, like your MSP or your MSSP. Like we can really have conversations with them. And Brad, to your point in talking about the architecture reviews, like if you have a DevOps group that you've hired, or you have a company that is looking to migrate you to, to Azure or to AWS, we can sort of act on your behalf and help you have conversations with them so that everything is thought of through the lens of compliance. Is that the right way to put it?
I think so. Things come up all the time, and they come up in spurs. Sometimes there'll be a period of time where nothing comes up, but whether it's from your client saying, hey, how come you aren't going through and doing a SOC 1 as well as a SOC 2, or whatever it might be, we can help jump in on those conversations, actually get on the call with your clients or your vendors or whoever it might be pressing a question to you, and really determine, does it make sense, does it not, and provide that counsel, if you will, almost like a legal counsel, compliance
Exactly.
counsel is what we call it. So yeah, Carlos, I think that makes a lot of sense.
No, that's perfect. And I think we'll review one more of these, and then we'll go to the next slide where we show you all the list of frameworks and standards that we're involved with. And then we'll, give folks a time to answer one last question. And then if we don't have any, then we can certainly give some folks time back in their day. So the reviewing the customer contract obligations, David, I'm going to throw that one to you because it's something that I think can be extremely valuable, especially if folks aren't necessarily understanding how to look at those contracts through the lens of compliance.
Yeah, this is good. I was going to mention another scenario, a real life scenario that also ties in this. So it's a good question. And, whether it be a new customer or a potential customer, understanding what your compliance obligations can be a big part of that. Just really depends on the service that you're providing to them and who your customer is. And I want to give one example of something pretty recent that I went through personally with a client, and they were providing a certain service. I won't go into too much details, and they basically had a flow down requirement coming due to a government contract, which seems to be coming up more and more these days. Government contracts will then require a certain level of compliance. In this case, FISMA being one of them. And one of the big things that we had to go through, which this also ties into the security architecture reviews we spoke about earlier, is that customer then had to assess their whole environment and figure out, say, okay, well, we're trying to bring on this very large government customer, and how are we going to do this? Because something like a FedRAMP or a FISMA is very prescriptive. The government is very, very particular about how you handle their data, how you handle the system, and we had to go through a huge security architecture review to understand exactly within their current environment what was sufficient to meet those FISMA requirements, and what they actually had to spin up new instances of, some physical instances in some cases, or virtual instances of their environment to completely separate out that environment for this new customer, which was a very large government entity. So, just understand that this ties back to the contracts, also ties into the security architecture reviews, because that's a huge part of what a huge driver for compliance in some cases is understanding what your customers require of you, generally contractually, because you're signing an agreement that says you do this. So you need to make sure that you have the right controls in place, you're meeting the right compliance requirements, and that you have visibility into what they're asking for. So I just want to use that as an example, Carlos. Hopefully that answers your question.
No, it's beautiful, and I think it's a great way to explain that, how it can be helpful. So let's go ahead, go to the next slide, and look at all the. I think it's the one where we have all the various seals and where what we're experienced with. Essentially, if it's compliance in the cybersecurity space, we've helped folks with from from ISO to SOC 2 to high trust PCI, NIST, like FISMA, FedRAMP, StateRAMP, anything compliance related. We understand it from the audit side, so we can certainly help and explain and help you through things from the other side of the table. I'd say that one thing to say to folks as we're kind of wrapping things up, and something to think about, and I'm sure you already are, is that with the the most recent cybersecurity plan that came out of Washington, and also some of the the SEC guidelines that are making it more of a mandatory thing to report certain breaches and these sort of things. I think that the regulatory component of compliance is only going to become more stringent and more important. And I think like viewing all of this through the lens of risk is going to be a continued, there's going to be a continued uptick in that. And so I think that having experts like us on the side of the table help you think about those things now is going to help not just for today, but going forward into the future as our environment that we're in continues to evolve and change through different laws and regulations, and also through as technology changes. So that's just something that we've seen, and I wanted to lay that out there. And I'd also just like to thank everyone for allowing us to do a little bit of a commercial today. I mean, typically, again, we're providing feedback on trends or thought leadership or updates on a specific standard. But today we really wanted to give you information on this particular service because we think it can be really valuable. So I'll give you guys, if you guys have something else to say, I'd say jump in now. Otherwise, let's let the folks get back to work and be looking for emails from us, and then let us know if we can answer more questions. And we're certainly happy to jump on a call and lend a hand. Does that sound? I mean, I didn't really tee that up very well, guys. But do you have anything else you'd like to add, or are we good to let folks go and we'll talk to them later down the road?
Yeah, Carlos, I think we did a good job covering most things. If there's any questions, we can be available for a call anytime. And again, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, most certainly. All right, guys. We'll see you next month for the penetration testing webinar. Take care.